Welcome in to the Rockies Insider. I'm your Rockies Insider, Patrick Lyons, here live at Coors Field on Faith Day with a concert going on behind me. I think my technological equipment is going to be all right for the time being. Rockies get a series win against the Pittsburgh Pirates despite the loss on Sunday. The Legend of Warming Bernabel continues to grow, and so much more pertaining to those Colorado Rockies, who entered this weekend 6-6 since the All-Star break, playing a tough Pirates club who had won 8 of their last 9, and yet they come away with their third home series win. In fact, third home series win in a row. They started the second half with wins against the Twins and the Cardinals, series wins, that is, and that's not bad for a team that only had 2 series wins in the entire first half combined. We also learned that Warming Bernabel has absolutely arrived. I don't know if this guy is going to continue to play at the ungodly pace, at the almost Trevor Story like start to his career. I think we all can recall 2016 when Trevor Story made his debut and had 3 home runs in the first 2 games and just continued with the first 4 games and 7, the first 10 games. And he continued on that way up until the time that he got injured and ended up missing what was close to the final 2 months of the season. But he was on a torrid start, and Warming Bernabel has started his career in a similar way. After his performance on Saturday night, he became the second player in modern era history with 14 or more hits, 8+ extra base hits through his 7 career major league games. Only one other player did it. That was in 1977, and I've never heard of this player, Mitchell Page. So hopefully the same fate does not befall Warming Bernabel as did Mitchell Page. But Bernabel on Friday night during that incredible comeback, of course, I will talk about that incredible, improbable, impossible victory on Friday night, that comeback win that was just incredible, 17-6, and Warming Bernabel was a double shy of a cycle in that game. He has been fantastic. His defense has shined on Sunday. I don't know that he would necessarily say he made a miscue over at first base, but there was a ground ball to him that he stepped on first before throwing home. In the post-game presser, manager Warren Schaefer did mention that in sort of some of those mental miscues that the team did make on Sunday during the 9-5 loss to the Pirates. Now, in this game, Pittsburgh got ahead early, 8-1, and yet it felt not like the Rockies were going to be out of it because of how they were able to battle back, as they did on Friday night, trailing 9-0. So Rockies ended up getting it to be 8-5, and a lot of that had to do with a really big 6th inning where you had 3 consecutive home runs. That's right, back-to-back home runs. Only the 9th time in franchise history. Mickey Moniak got it started with a 2-run home run that ended up scoring Tyler Freeman, who had walked to start the 6th. He had a single. He walked twice, had a hit by pitch. Schaefer saying that's a classic leadoff hitter type game. It's the kind of a game for a leadoff hitter that guys in today's day and age don't typically do or want to do anymore. But Freeman, that grinder, got the job done. Moniak ends up going deep with a 433-foot blast. Hunter Goodman, right after that, 451 onto the concourse in left field for his 21st home run of the season. And then Jordan Beck finishes it off. 3 consecutive home runs. First time the Rockies have done that in any capacity since 2018. That's right. June 19th, 2018, against the Mets here at Coors Field. Nolan Arenado, Trevor Story, and Ian Desmond. Incredible stuff. Rockies would fall short. They were frustrated in early parts of the game. Hunter Goodman did a Bo Jackson, snapped the bat over his knee. And you saw Jordan Beck a little frustrated, said something to the umpire when he was called out on strikes at the end of the 7th inning. He said that, yeah, maybe he used some magic language, but he didn't get his money's worth. He was gone. Brenton Doyle ended up coming into the game in center field, had somewhat of a miscue that was originally ruled an error, but it ended up later getting changed to a double. That was inconsequential. But 3 straight home runs shows you that this team definitely is in every single game that they get in. Talking with Schaefer pregame on Sunday at the ballpark, I sort of made the analogy between how the Rockies have been able to come from behind and totally brush aside and brush off an early deficit, and how similar that was on Friday and Saturday to what they've been able to do in the second half, brushing off the first half of the season, brushing off what was a historically bad start to a season. This is a fresh start. Let's battle. Every pitch is an opportunity to have some success. Wins and losses isn't the only way to define success. It is at the end of the day. But when you are as down bad as the Rockies are, you have to start to define success in different ways. The little things. If you take care of the little things, the big things will take care of themselves. And so the Rockies need to do the little things well. And the more that they've been doing those little things well, the better the results have been. And so they brush off the bad start. They brush off a 9-0 deficit on Friday. I believe it was a 4-run deficit at one point on Saturday before coming back to win that game 8-5. And you begin to think, you know what, Warren Schaefer is definitely playing with house money, but he's definitely getting a lot more out of this roster right now. Let's head over to the chat. Felix signing in. Good to see you. Hickster saying suspicious today. Alfonso Marquez, there was definitely some questionable calls, to say the least. Best series this season? I think so. I mean, you win 2 out of 3. There's not going to be very many that you sweep. So you can really only hope to take 2 out of 3, and doing it in this way of scoring 17 runs, great. You give up 16, but it's the fact that you were down 9-0 is pretty incredible. Rhino saying, have we seen the last of Tolia? Did he get Wally pipped by Warming Bernabel? Actually, he would have gotten Lou Gehrig. Michael Tolia would be Wally Pipp. He was the first baseman before Lou Gehrig. And I know that's what you meant, Rhino. I know that's what you mean. Yes, absolutely. There might even be somebody else in the way of Michael Tolia besides Warming Bernabel. There's now a new name that was just recently added to the Rockies' 40-man roster. Rhino, getting ahead of yourself, but I love that. Will it be Dollander, Hughes, or bullpen game on Wednesday versus the Blue Jays? That's right. It's to be announced. Could be Dollander. We'll talk about that, talk about the probables in that Toronto series. Also on Sunday, Yanquiel Fernandez, 2 for 4, recorded his 3rd career multi-hit game. Does a nice job against the Pirates. He did have also 2 mental miscues coming off the bag on what should have been a double, but he popped up just a little bit, came off when he was shuffling his feet around. That play ended up getting overturned in the Pirates' favor. There was also a play with a runner on first, a single to right, and Fernandez throws the ball to third base, kind of questionable, allows the runner to go from second to third. That was ultimately, I think, inconsequential because you did have a home run. I believe that came off the bat of Spencer Horwitz. So that was no harm, no foul. But nevertheless, Warren Schaefer said, you know what? I like the aggressiveness. So he didn't have that much issue with throwing to third base and allowing the runner who singled to get to second base. The other miscue was Tovar with asking for a second timeout in his at-bat, and that ultimately ruled a strike 3. And so he was done in that at-bat. That was to start the 8th inning. I had to write that one as an upside-down K. Forward K, strikeout swinging. Backwards K, you strike out looking. What is a strikeout when you accidentally call a timeout? And so it's ruled a strike, even though you didn't see a pitch. I wrote an upside-down strikeout. That's how I keep score. Mitch Keller was fine on Sunday. Spencer Horwitz, a 2-homer game for him. We saw a couple multi-homer games this weekend from the Pirates. Bradley Blaylock, 5 innings, gives up 7 runs. Just his secondary stuff wasn't great, according to Warren Schaefer. Wasn't like what he was able to do in his last start out in Cleveland. Wasn't what he was able to do, really, his first 3 starts coming back from AAA. Offered some 2-out walks. Just wasn't himself. Schaefer talked about the mental errors, praised Tyler Freeman, and just said, the team ultimately needs to learn from these kind of miscues so that they don't make those unforced errors, those mental errors. That's how you win ball games. And when you're a team that is struggling as badly as the Rockies, when you make errors in a game like that, you are not going to win a majority of them. When you're a really good team, you might win about half of them. But when you're a great team, you don't make those kind of mental errors. Saturday's game, was a good one. Not as exciting as Friday nights, but everyone in the ballpark was juiced to see Paul Skeens, despite the fact that I think attendance was lower on Saturday than it was on Friday. Only about 32,000 in the ballpark on Saturday. On Sunday, also 32,000. But it was Skeens Day on Air Force Day. Can't make that up. That's crazy that the Rockies go ahead and schedule it. Now, did they know in advance that maybe, just maybe, with the Pirates coming to town, this would be a good opportunity to have Air Force Day? Sure. But you still have a 1 in 5 shot that Skeens is going to make that start, maybe even less, because you can't even guarantee he's going to be healthy. But a lot of Skeens jerseys in the ballpark, I think more than I've ever seen from that day's starting pitcher since covering the team. And the thing I noticed about Skeens, a couple things, was, he got out to the mound super quickly. He was out immediately. There were even 2 innings in which the umpire had to wait because the clock had not gone down to 17 seconds yet. And so Skeens was kind of waiting around for 10 seconds. Should also mention, thoughts are a little all over the place from Saturday because I was there as a fan with my dad. He asked to go see Paul Skeens. I couldn't let the kid down after all the times he took me to ball games midweek to go see Roger Clemens or Greg Maddux, Randy Johnson, you name it, in the middle of a busy work week. He got it done. And so, you know what? Got to go to the game with my dad. Blessed to be able to do that. Shout out to Philip, who I was really stoked to meet at the game on Saturday. And shout out to your pops in Oklahoma as well. But you had a flyover from the Air Force. Thought that was absolutely classy. I did hear from some folks that Paul Skeens went out to the mound before the game to check on the state of the mound, check on the status of the mound. And a lot of people had never recalled the time in which a pitcher went out to the mound before their start to see what was going on with the mound. Paul Skeens does those kind of things. He had one point in the game, maybe it was at the start of the 5th inning, didn't like how the mound was. And we had a little bit of a delay game as the grounds crew came out, tamped down the area around the pitching rubber just a little bit. And you know what? He has a presence about him. He's a big dude. He has an absolute presence about him. He ends up getting chased in the 6th inning after taking a no-hitter into the 4th inning. Jordan Beck had the single. Jordan Beck also with the 3-run home run that did well to chase Paul Skeens and what was his first career start at Coors Field. Now, had he pitched in Colorado before? Absolutely. Right? He went to the Air Force Academy, so he's familiar with pitching at altitude, pitching at Colorado Springs. In fact, the Pirates, with a day off on Thursday, Skeens did go out and give a tour of the academy to his teammates, those that showed up with him. So that was cool to see that. When the Rockies were able to get those 3 runs in the 6th inning, that actually snapped a scoreless streak of 18 consecutive innings for Paul Skeens, who I think in the month of July had a ridiculous 0.61 ERA in the month of July. So he's been really great. He was dominant, but he wasn't absolutely shut down. That's why the Rockies were able to get to him for those 4 runs that he was ultimately charged with. But the impressive thing about Paul Skeens is he is the anti-Antonio Senzatella because he's not allowing runs early on. In fact, he's not allowed to run in the 1st inning when typically your best 3 hitters are up. He's not allowed to run in the 1st inning in all 23 of his starts this season. 2nd most consecutive starts to begin a season without allowing a 1st inning run since 1923. Yeah. So that streak is 27 by Bob Shockey, who not a Hall of Famer, but was Hall of Very Good. I know that name pretty well. Might have been with the Yankees for a period of time, but it's going to have a few more starts before he's able to do that. Still, last 6 starts, 1.41 ERA. He was fantastic. His lady friend, also from LSU, Livy Dunn, in the building. She got up on the scoreboard. She was in Breckenridge apparently this weekend. So, Skeens took over Coors Field as superstar players are prone to do from time to time. The other important Pirates note from this game, Leovor Peguero. I was trying to get video of the final out. Dugan Darnell, not a save situation, but still closing out his 2nd consecutive game. Wanted to get that, to post that. People love seeing Dinger waving the big flag, the big CR. And as I try to film the final out, Peguero goes and hits a home run. And as he's rounding first base, I realize, holy smokes, that's his 3rd home run of the game. You don't see a ton of those. So impressive for him, for a guy who had 8 career home runs coming into this game and only 1 this season. He has a trifecta. In the game on Saturday, though, unfortunately, Seth Halverson injured. He was removed after only 5 pitches in what was his first outing following the following the trade deadline. And you sort of can't make that kind of stuff up in terms of the Rockies. Did they do what they need to do at the trade deadline? I've made my feelings clear on how they should have done a lot more, especially considering the high leverage reliever market that was out there, and possibly trading Victor Vodnik and Seth Halverson, since there are strong odds that one, if not both of those relievers will get hurt. 2 guys that throw 100 miles an hour. And by the time they come back from whatever injury that they may get, which it's part of the game, it's one of the most volatile positions for injuries in all of baseball, or rather most volatile roles, because they're a pitcher. Sure, that's dangerous, that's violent, that throwing motion, but for them to be relievers late in the game, and sure, 4 or 5 years left of club control, but you have to say, are you going to be relevant then? Are you going to need those guys at that time? There are players that are in college and in high school right now that in 4 or 5 years will impact the Rockies. That's how far away they are, and that's how far off 4 or 5 years are from now. So you can replenish. You can find another guy like that in 3 years, a year or 2 ahead of when those players would eventually become free agents. So that's just really unfortunate. He did have an MRI. It's kind of inconclusive. I don't know that it's inconclusive. Might not have liked the results from it, but he's going to get a second opinion. Not looking good, unfortunately. Rockies did overcome that 4-run deficit, as I mentioned, in that game on Saturday. Props to them. Warming Bernabel, another 3-hit performance, had 2 doubles, 7-game hitting streak that unfortunately was snapped on Sunday, tied for the 4th longest hitting streak to start a career in franchise history. 2nd straight multi-extra base hit game, and had at least 1 extra base hit in 4 of his first 7 games in the majors. 3rd Rocky this season to record at least 2 straight games with multiple extra base hits. Jordan Beck, Hunter Goodman, and now Warming Bernabel. That's what this guy is doing. Jordan Beck also homered on Saturday for his 13th homer. So dude's got 14 homers right now to go along with 12 stolen bases. Maybe, just maybe, Jordan Beck can add his name to that list that Brenton Doyle put his name on with 20 home runs and 20 stolen bases. He's got a way to go, but he might be thinking about it just a little bit. Finally, Friday's game, 17-16 comeback win. Rockies with the 9-run deficit. It was surely the only game ever like that. And the Rockies game notes didn't say that it was the first game ever like that, but I did eventually see something by Opta Sports that was, I think, trailing by 9 runs, allowing a 9-run inning on top of that, and scoring 17 runs. Something absurd like that, because that was a Coors Field classic. And it was only the 2nd game for the Rockies even where they had given up 16 or more runs and still won the game. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Senzatella did not last very long. Only got 2 outs. Gave up, or was charged with 8 runs, gave up a grand slam to O'Neill Cruz. Carson Palmquist comes in, immediately gives up a 3-run homer to Andrew McCutchen. And Senzatella now on the IL with a right middle finger blister, 15-day IL. What are they going to do now? Not clear, because he's got an 11.76 ERA and a 4.42 batting average against in the first. That's just unacceptable. An opener. It worked once for him. Do you need to do that again? I think why not? Sure, it's a small sample size, but you at least have that sample size in your favor because it worked. Designated for assignment, waiver, I don't know. How much confidence do you have in AAA right now? Do you need to give guys opportunities? Warren Schaefer thinks so, especially if guys are knocking on the door. Even if they're not kicking it down, they're knocking. And I think that's important. Brenton Doyle, 4 for 5 in this game. So great for him to have that moment with the year that he has been having off the field and on the field as well, but has the walk-off 2-run home run. Absolutely incredible. Warming Bernabel and Tovar, both 4 for 6 in that game. Also want to mention some trade deadline notes. Jake Bird clean shaven. I don't know if you saw that one, but Ryan McMahon reached out to Jake Bird to let him know, you don't need to get rid of the beard. Just clean it up. Apparently, Bill Schmidt did joke with Ryan McMahon that he should shave to make a good first impression, but Schmidt didn't say that with Bird. Not the same relationship with Bird as Ryan McMahon, who he's known since he was a teenager. But Ryan McMahon told Bird, just clean it up. You don't have to get rid of it. Maybe Jake Bird should have listened. His first outing did not go terribly well. Recorded only 1 out and gave up 4 runs. Speedway Classic. Are y'all watching that? Let's get to your chats, your comments in the chat. Best game of the year on Friday. Yeah, nothing's going to top that one. That's honest. And I wasn't at that game. I'll be honest. I was not there on Friday night. And I'd have to say if I was, I mean, yeah, arguably that's probably one of the best games here in the last 5 or so years, at least since, 2018 when the Rockies were incredibly relevant. There was a Yankees game that seemed improbable for them to come back in 2023, but it was nothing like Friday. Nothing at all. While the Innocent pointing out, the Beck home run dinked right off the top of the Bridich barrier. I wanted to film that one too with my phone. Forgot to take it out in time because I could sense Jordan Beck had Skeens' number. He'd walked in his first at-bat, singled in the second in the 4th inning, second at-bat in the 4th inning, and then had that home run. St. Dinger, welcome. Warming is already in my Rockies Hall of Fame. I mean, why not? When you talk about all-time great starts, put him in. Boom, first ballot Hall of Famer already. Doesn't need to do anything else. Wild the Innocent in the chat. How many home runs for McCutchen in his career? Yeah, I should have looked that one up. He's definitely up there. I know he's probably top 5 easily. I think he's number 2 after Goldschmidt as far as active players are concerned, but he absolutely loves hitting here. No doubt about it. Also in the chat is Halverson, long-term sidelined. He's probably going to be gone for a while. 15-day IL is part of Sunday's transactions. When you have an injury like that, which again, we don't know to what extent, but when it looks like that and it's to the elbow, that's something that a guy's going to need to probably take a month away to sort things out, let it heal, not pick up a baseball. I think that's where we're at, but we'll find out in the coming days with that. Speedway Classic, shit show. I mean, maybe, I don't know. Rain delay was really bad. They pushed the start back 2 hours. Then they had to push the game back to Sunday, which was supposed to be an off day. Not great. I thought the merchandising and branding was really on point. It looked cool. Tyler Stevenson had the Ricky Bobby inspired catcher's gear from Talladega Nights. 85,000 was how many tickets were sold. Let's not forget the first ever game in Denver at Mile High Stadium. There were 80,000 people at that game, and they didn't have to do it at a racetrack in Tennessee, the first ever game, big league game in Tennessee. They just had people show up to big old football stadium back on April 9th, 1993. Love that Tim McGraw was there singing the national anthem. McGraw, perfect fit as his father, Tug McGraw, big league pitcher, 19 years in the majors, recorded the final out for the Phillies in 1980 in their World Series win. Cool Ferris wheel. I love that you had Chipper Jones throwing out the first pitch to Johnny Bench. That was great. I don't know if you've heard the story of Lyon Richardson, but he was optioned back to AAA on Saturday. And as he's heading back to Louisville, he's in his car. He gets the call out about midnight. Hey, dude, we need you back because Atlanta and Cincinnati both said, I don't know if we've got enough arms to do this because this is a mess. And the commissioner allows Richardson to use his jet, his personal private jet, to fly into Bristol. That's pretty wild. All right, Toronto starters. Monday, it's going to be Tanner Gordon, 2-3, 4.85 ERA against lefty Eric Lauer. Solid this season. You might remember him, the former Padres left-hander, 6-2, 2.68 ERA. Tuesday, same 6:40 time. It's Kyle Freeland. Feeling better. Talked with him on Sunday. Kept a little bit of distance, but not too much. As we were having a conversation, you could hear his throat a little bit raspy. He's feeling a little bit better. Head is still a little bit cloudy with symptoms from that illness. So hopefully by Tuesday, he'll be a lot closer to 100%. Might only be 90%, but he'll do battle with Jose Barrios, 7-4, 3.84 for the Blue Jays. And then on Sunday, Kevin Gausman back in Denver, the Colorado kid for the Blue Jays, 3.99 ERA and a 7.8 record. Who's going to go on Wednesday? Is it Anthony Molina? Is it Chase Anderson? Bullpen day? Maybe. We'll see. Chase Dollander would probably be my pick for that contest. on Wednesday at 1:10 p.m. You enjoying can you guys hear the concert behind me, by the way? It's Faith Day. They've been playing for about a half an hour. Rockies Insider talking about, well, the Rockies, the Blue Jays, so many notes. Bill Schmidt, the GM, spoke on Friday and had some interesting comments about this year's trade deadline, spoke with media, and said that the five prospects that the Rockies ended up acquiring from the Yankees, from Atlanta, in the 3 trades for Ryan McMahon, Jake Bird, and Tyler Kinley, that unfortunately, because Double-A is where the highest of them are currently at, we've already seen some of them debut, but they're probably not going to make an impact on this year's roster. Schmidt said, quote, "I wouldn't say this year per se, but I would think in the next 2 years, you'll see a chance to see some of those guys there." And so I think there's a chance maybe 2 to 3 of those players will maybe make their debut with the Rockies, maybe contribute a little bit more than just having a debut. Was unfortunate that to start the presser, Bill Schmidt unfortunately did forget the names of the 2 players acquired in the Ryan McMahon trade. It was a week ago, but I think you need to know those names. I think that's important. He referred to Josh Gross as Gomes and referred to Griffin Herring as Gunner. Schmidt did recall the names of the other 3 prospects, so I thought that was a bit odd that mistake was made. He was asked about who initiates the trade discussions. Schmidt was honest, saying, honestly, it's the contending team. They're the ones looking to get better. They're the team that is looking to do business. I think, while that is very true, because of the size of the Rockies front office being a little bit smaller than others, and because of how they've approached the trade deadline in the past, I think they've not been as proactive as they should have been. I think the Rockies are a team that needs to make phone calls to other teams and say, "Hey, I'm interested in this prospect. What veteran did you like from our roster that we could get?" But with a smaller staff, with a smaller scouting staff, that might not be able to look around the league and say, "Hey, let's cherry pick this guy from that roster." And over here in the Northwest League, I think we've got ourselves a gem. Let's see if we can nab that guy. That's a little bit harder to do for them with the amount of investment that owner Dick Monfort makes in the scouting department and in the front office and in the coaching staff, the big league coaching staff and minor league coaching staff, frankly. So as I said, Halverson and Vodnik were 2 players that, while I love watching them pitch and I think they're great big leaguers, maybe what's best for the franchise is to step away from them to try to build more depth in the system and try to build towards the future. And, to that kind of thinking, Bill Schmidt said that the asking price that the Rockies had for both Vodnik and Halverson were very high. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that these are players that the Rockies will have for a few more years. Right now, they're not, they're making the league minimum, so that's not a ton. And, if Halverson continues to save games or Vodnik ends up doing that a lot more, that will make them more expensive in arbitration, but they won't really get that more expensive because middle relievers, if you're not saving a ton of games, your value, your contract in arbitration is not going to get that high. So I don't really know how much the Rockies are saving and how much they are helping themselves in the future. There are scenarios in which in 4 years from now, you're looking at Vodnik and Halverson closing out deep games late for the Rockies when they're in the hunt for the postseason. And then in that scenario, in that reality, you go, that was wise to not totally just jettison every player of value at the 2025 deadline. Yes. Frankly, I think the odds are a lot higher that neither of those guys are impacting the Rockies in that way when the Rockies are contending in 4 or 5 years from now. That's a lot of what ifs, right? They're healthy. They're still contributing at an incredibly high level. And the Rockies are, they need those outs late in games. That's a lot of what ifs, a lot more than saying, what if we just tried to bring in as many great minor league players as possible, and they'll sort of sort themselves out just a little bit. They are trying to do that to some degree, but you need more guys. because not every great prospect ends up panning out. So the more you have, the better your system is overall, the higher the likelihood that it will work out for you. Rockies did not see it that way. Schmidt was also asked about Chris Bryant, and he said, I have no news for you. Just point blank, no news for you on that front. Found it oddly coincidental that this weekend, or that question at least, came the same weekend that Alexander Canario, which was one half of the package that San Francisco gave up to acquire Chris Bryant, was also here with the Pittsburgh Pirates. So very coincidental, to say the least. Friday's transactions, you had Carson Palmquist up to take one of two spots vacated by Tyler Kinley and Jake Bird. Dugan Darnell had his contract selected for the very first time. Dugan Darnell, if you don't know the story, you need to listen up. If you don't know the story, you haven't been paying attention to Blake Street Banner, because those guys have been banging the drum about Dugan Darnell. In fact, there was somebody in the Rockies front office. Almost every time I see him, he brings up the fact that, like, oh man, those Blake Street Banner guys, they love Dugan Darnell. And yeah, they sent out a little missive saying Dugan Darnell deserves an opportunity only a couple days ago, right around the trade deadline. And sure enough, their wish was granted, I guess you could say. So tip of the cap to the Blake Street Banner. Those guys do incredible work covering the minor leagues. They know their stuff. They work hard. Tip of the cap to Blake Street Banner. Make sure you're following them and following their YouTube channel as well. But Dugan Darnell, you can probably see tons of conversations with Blake Street Banner, but if you don't know the story, it's a great one. And if you don't know what happened on Friday, that was a great story as well, because he gets the win in his major league debut at 28 years old. Incredible. First rookie to get a win in his debut since, well, Chase Dollander earlier this year, but the first reliever to do that since Scott Obert back in April of 2015. Wow. So Dugan Darnell went to a small school in Michigan. That's where he's from. School's called Adrian College, Division III school. We know D3 players, great grinders, don't always get opportunities, don't always pan out. And I don't even want to say pan out, because if you're playing D3 ball, sometimes there's a reason. Your talent level might not be there. That's why you're not playing D1 or at a really competitive and really quality junior college. And yet Dugan Darnell had that belief in himself that, you know what, it might take a little bit of time, but I'm worth that. I'm worth putting in that effort. And so despite not getting drafted, he had that belief in himself. And in 2019 and in 2020, he plays independent baseball for the Eastside Diamond Hoppers of Utica, Michigan. So an independent league, the United Shore League, not a ton of big leaguers come out of a league like that. It's one of these smaller indie leagues. But in 2020, in 22 games and about 28 or so innings, had a 0.31 ERA, was undeniable. That opened the door. Colorado Rockies give him an opportunity, sign him in February of 2021 to a minor league deal, and slowly starts chipping away year after year to get himself to the bigs. Over 5 seasons in the minors with Colorado, dude amassed a 21-8 record, 3.74 ERA with 24 saves and 332 strikeouts. So 11.7 strikeout per 9 rate, pretty darn good in 200 games. Was named a Rockies minor league organizational all-star in 2021. And then in this year at AAA, one step away from the majors at a time in which the Rockies need big leaguers. They need guys that they can rely upon. And when you're a 28-year-old veteran in AAA, you know what? You've got a certain intangible that some younger players just don't have. So this year, 3.19 ERA in 35 games, 63 strikeouts, a very low whip. That was 9th best in the Pacific Coast League, minimum 30 innings. So he's just been really good this year. And it's just great to see a guy like him get an opportunity when you're a non-drafted free agent like that, trying to make it work, getting paid $50 a week to play independent baseball. Yeah, you're a professional because you're getting paid. But how much? You can't survive on things like that. And the Rockies have had other players like that in their system to try to get it done. And it doesn't always have a happy ending, but for Dugan Darnell, it does. And I'm sure he wants that happy ending to be even happier and for there to be even more happy endings in his future because he's going to have a long career. At least that's what he hopes. So that is absolutely fantastic to see something like that. I'll get back to the topic at hand, but Jonathan Morris in the chat said, who should the Rockies sign this offseason? Great question. I haven't looked at free agents yet right now because this would be that time of year where maybe you look and say, the Rockies need to retool on a couple things. And there's a couple voids that need to be filled. And there are some players out there. There are some free agents that they could target to sign to fill those voids and get them back into a postseason kind of hunt. But unfortunately, the Rockies have too many holes on this roster. There's too many voids that there really isn't anyone that I could recommend for them to sign right now at this point. You know, Tyra Estrada was the guy they brought in with 1 year and an option. Kyle Farmer, a utility guy, and then a backup catcher in Jacob Stallings. I think it's just going to be a lot more of those deals. But there is some potential that the Rockies could make a splash. Now, it might sound crazy, but hear me out. And actually, you don't need to hear me out because I'm not really pitching this as here's what I think the Rockies should do. But what they could do is, crazy enough, they might kick the tires on a guy like Bo Bichette. Now, hear me out. Blue Jays in town, obviously, right now. But purely being speculative, it would not shock me entirely for the Rockies to go back to the drawing board, or rather go back to what they did a couple years ago when they signed Chris Bryant, and it didn't really make a ton of sense. From the Rockies standpoint right now, why would Bo Bichette be a good option for them to sign? Well, first off, I think they're going to have money to spend this offseason. Not a ton. They've been cutting payroll the last few years. Their attendance is still pretty solid overall, right? But, you know, they cut a lot of money with Ryan McMahon. And, you know, Bo Bichette's not going to replace Ryan McMahon's $16 million a year contract. Even with $10 million coming off the books with Germán Marquez this offseason. And even if you find, an option to get rid of Jose Senzatella, no one's going to take his contract off your hands. So you would still have to pay him, period. But they don't have a lot of money invested right now in the future of this roster. So I think they could be able to splurge. Now, here's why it doesn't make sense. And this is the biggest part of this conversation about possibly bringing in someone like a Bo Bichette. First off, Rockies aren't anywhere close to contending. They're not. But sometimes teams will make a move like this when they are about a year away on the cusp from contending. Unfortunately, I don't think the Rockies are a year away from contending, so it still doesn't make sense. It's another long-term deal that has Chris Bryant potential written all over it. Entering the season, Bo Bichette was the best shortstop free agent that was going to be available this offseason. I think he still will be. Big drop-off after him. And granted, he's not even going to be playing shortstop for the Rockies, which is a very Rockies move. Signing a third baseman like Chris Bryant, but he doesn't play third base. You sign Ian Desmond, who's a solid shortstop and center fielder, and he ends up playing first base. So it doesn't really work out. And besides Kyle Tucker, this offseason, he's going to be the best hitter under 30 years old. Bichette, only 28. So not a ton of younger players hitting free agency. So that's going to really allow his market to be a long-term kind of market. So, yeah, I don't know that that's going to come to fruition. It probably won't. But if they're really looking to try to kickstart something, because who is going to be the face of this franchise now? Ryan McMahon did a good job as that, and Kyle Freeland is certainly there. But what everyday player is that guy? Ezekiel Tovar, sure. He's going to have to do probably a lot more heavy lifting over these final 2 months. But do the Rockies need more than that? Than just Ezekiel Tovar? You can hope that Brenton Doyle is going to step back up. But if you're looking for those marquee names and faces, it's Ezekiel Tovar and Kyle Freeland right now. That's it. So Bo Bichette, from that standpoint, might make a little bit of sense. Could be kind of interesting to see what happens with that. Also with this Blue Jays series, got to keep an eye on the bullpen because the Rockies bullpen suffering. And now with Halverson being out, bad. 46 of 93 earned runs allowed by Colorado in those first 14 games post All-Star break have been allowed by that bullpen relievers, allowing 1 run in 13 of those 14 games, 7.26 ERA to start the second half, trailing only Atlanta's 8.83 ERA, and they're walking a ton of batters. I mean, on Sunday, Angel Chivilli, he hit the first 2 batters that he faced to start an inning. So not a walk, but you put guys on like that, it's going to come back to bite. It's going to come back to haunt in a really big way. So we'll see about Bo Bichette. We absolutely will see about that. Talked about Dugan Darnell. We can talk about maybe some more debuts because Warming Bernabel became the 10th player to make his debut. Darnell, the 11th player to debut. Only the Marlins with 12 and the A's with 13 are in double digits with debuts. I think that number is going to get eclipsed. I've got 7 more potential debuts, although I think we're only going to end up seeing 3. Julio Carreras, who's in that Warming Bernabel camp as still a somewhat young guy who's been around forever in this organization that might be given an opportunity should there be another injury of some sort. He's out there. Kyle Karros, that could be a early to mid-September call-up. He's got to do his job in Albuquerque first. Sterling Thompson, I could see that. I got a long shot in Braden Ward. That could be one. On the pitching side, Gabriel Hughes, definitely, as long as he's healthy. And then 2 long shots. I mean, Connor Van Scoyac would be more if they needed another reliever. But Mason Albright, despite the fact he has an ERA north of 6 right now, I see some upside from that lefty, and I could see him possibly making his debut. That's 7 guys. Ryan Feltner, will we see him back? Not sure, because he's on the AAA injured list with right shoulder inflammation. He's been 0-3 with an 8.57 ERA at Albuquerque. Let's not forget that last September, he was great. In fact, his final 15 starts last year was great. 2.98 ERA with a 2.27 batting average against in those final 15 starts. In September, fantastic. 1.78 ERA, held Shohei Ohtani hitless on the final day of the regular season, preventing him from that NL batting title and that triple crown. Also want to point out 36 trades on Thursday at the deadline. And for my spreadsheet a few years ago that I made, I tried to break down every trade deadline move for the Rockies from June to August, because in August you could still make trades. It was a waiver deadline trades. And I created 3 categories. Trades that were of subtraction, like in 2003, Colorado deals Tony Womack to the Cubs for a minor leaguer that was in Double-A. He'd play 1 more year at Tulsa, 1 more year of organized ball, and so he would never even debut. Emmanuel Ramirez didn't make it to the majors. You have trades of addition, like in 2018, when they added Sung-Hwan Oh from Toronto for 3 prospects. Colorado was in the hunt for the postseason, and they would find it with Oh in their bullpen. And then deals that were kind of nothing. They were deals that it was basically your player for my player of similar value. Maybe one team was getting a little bit something better. Maybe the Rockies were taking back a less talented player for a better player, but that player was getting a little bit more money. You know, I don't know all of the trades ins and out like that. So I would just classify those as kind of nothing. Like 2013, Eric Young Jr. for Colin McHugh. Was that subtraction? Was that addition? Or was that somewhere in the middle? How about your pitcher? Or rather, that was a pitcher for a speedster deal. But 2005, you want to go Larry Bigby for Eric Burns? Outfielder for outfielder? What was that one really about? Kind of, again, talent for talent. So it was nothing. And that's something you can check out over on the Rockies Insider newsletter, breaking down some of those greats of the trade deadline deals. I think I even talked about it on Saturday's podcast, some of those deals. Rockies have not traditionally made a lot of those deals. I think it's since 2002 to 2021, they made about 7 of those subtraction trades of waving the white flag. When they should have probably waved the white flag a lot more, and with a lot more trades on top of that. On Sunday, Rockies added first baseman Blaine Crim from the Rangers. He was selected off waivers and optioned to AAA. Now, this corresponds with Michael Toglia being optioned to AAA. And at a time which Warming Bernabel is there at first base, you do have Warren Schaefer saying, Tolia's just got to hit. He's going to play every day, but he's got to hit. He's got to do certain things. And I don't know now if this is really the end, maybe not literally, of Michael Toglia with the Rockies, but the fact that he does get sent down, Warming Bernabel, now that starting first baseman. And the Rockies also bring in another player on the 40-man roster that is essentially first base only, in a Blaine Krim. 284 batting average for the 28-year-old, 888 OPS, 18 home runs, 71 RBI with Round Rock. He did make his debut with Texas this year, only played in about 5 games. Wasn't a very high round draft pick with them, was taken in the 19th round in 2019. So Blaine Krim is giving you some good depth as a guy I don't think was ever a top 30 prospect for the Rangers. Now maybe he's standing in the way of Michael Toglia. Is that him sending Toglia a message that he needs to do more? I think so. And Toglia does need to do more if he is going to be an everyday big leaguer. Wrapping up those transactions from Sunday, if you didn't hear about it, Toglia to AAA, Halverson on the IL with that right elbow strain. And then up, we saw one of them on Sunday, Nick Anderson, the reliever, and catcher Braxton Fulford. Shameless plug, new article over at Just Baseball. It's the Chatters Box with Kyle Freeland talking about his gutsy start in Cleveland and setting an example for those younger players of how you need to grind it out and just the youth movement in general. Think about this. Since the start of the 2021 season, you have only 2 players that, no, correction. Since the start of the 2021 season, Kyle Freeland is the only one on the active roster, right? You have Austin Gommer's been on the team since the start of 2021. And then you've got Ezekiel Tovar late in 2022 in September. Those are the only 3 guys that have been on this active roster right now and have been on the roster previously before 2023. I know I didn't phrase that very well. So I was editing myself in my head. Wait a minute, did I forget something? But yeah, that's it. You have 3 guys that have been around before 2023 right now, today, on the active roster. Concert is over. You like Dolan to return? Yeah, I think so too. Rockies Insider. I'm gonna self-edit again. Rockies Insider with me, Patrick Lyons. Your Rockies Insider, talking prospects, talking nothing but prospects here. And I tell you what, let's look at the Rockies from the lens of what did other teams do at the trade deadline? Because the trade deadline for a team that's out of contention is one in which you need to add players. You need to improve your future because your present is not looking great, or your present just isn't on track. There are plenty of teams that were right around 500 that weren't totally off the track. They weren't off the rails, but they just didn't have what they needed and they weren't going to be able to contend. So what? You know what? They waved their white flag. A lot of teams ended up doing that. And when you look at the Rockies compared to those other teams that waved the white flag, did they at least win the deadline from that perspective? I think a lot of people gave the Rockies better grades than what I did. You know, I said almost grading against themselves. It was sort of a C minus. But really, when you look at what they needed to do and improve the future of this franchise and possibly get a big player, right? Griffin Herring would be that one exception. You know, we don't know what the future is in store. I think that was a good one. You know, I think their grade is a lot closer to an F because they failed to make a difference. They just failed to make a difference. And when you do that, you know, maybe it is a little all or nothing to look at it from that perspective. But I think right now they are at that juncture where it is all or nothing and that they need to look at themselves through that lens. And they need to say, hey, this is not acceptable. We need to get the job done and we need to make some notable changes and improvements to the future of our franchise. And I just don't think that they did it. But let's take a look where the Rockies were when you compare them to what the other teams did at the deadline. The A's, they traded several players, Mason Miller being the big one, of course, with JP Sears. They bring back 5 prospects. All of them are in their top 30, including Leo DeVries, the number 3 prospect in all of baseball. You just can't do any better than that. You don't see top 10 prospects getting traded like this. And when I say top 10 prospects, I mean top 10 prospects now. I know Brendan Rodgers might have been in the top 10 at some point, but then once he got into affiliated baseball, the bloom was off the rose and he fell out of that top 10. He was no longer a top 10 prospect. He was, but he was no longer that top 10 prospect. And you have to evaluate and evaluate players like that when they fall out of the top 10. They're just not a top 10 prospect. They are not elite anymore. But Leo DeVries, right now, he is elite. They got him. Great job by the A's. Twins, they went crazy, trading 9 players, a third of their big league roster. They brought in 10 prospects, 6 in the top 30, including 3 in the top 7. Diamondbacks got a lot of depth. They brought in 9 prospects, 8 in the top 30, but only 3 in the top 10, with all of them in the back half. Number 6 was the highest. Orioles, 15 prospects. Wow. 6 of them were in the top 30. Nationals, 10 prospects, 6 in the top 30. And then you've got the Rockies. They only get 5 prospects, but 4 of them do appear in the top 30. So I just named you 5 teams that did fare better than the Rockies at the trade deadline. Did they have more to deal? Sure, some of them did. But you also have to be creative with what you got and do with it what you can. And I think the Rockies could have done a lot more and should have. So who are these prospects? Where did they go? Lefty Griffin Herring, number 5 on the Rockies list. He's behind Brody Brecht and ahead of Yanquiel Fernandez. Second baseman Rock Riggio goes to number 11 behind Zach Veen and ahead of Sean Sullivan. Righty Josh Gross goes to number 19 behind Eugenier Herrera, a name you don't hear much because he did have Tommy John surgery last year after he was acquired from the Brewers in the Nick Mears trade. So Gross ahead of shortstop Andy Perez, and then lefty Ben Shields behind Michael Persecki and ahead of Jackson Cox at number 28. So Rockies getting that kind of quantity, but not getting tons of quality. We'll see what happens, what kind of career guys like a Rock Riggio or Griffin Herring ends up having in the majors. Tip of the cap to the Yard Goats, who did welcome their 3 millionth fan to Dunkin' Donuts Park, now just Dunkin' Park, over the weekend. A 5-year-old by the name of Anderson Raymond. Not bad for, a small ballpark that is just packed out. I think that's one of the benefits. When you have a smaller ballpark, it makes the ticket that much hotter. And it's a hot ticket in Hartford at Dunkin' Park, a beautiful facility, beautiful ballpark named by Baseball Digest as the best AA ballpark in 2017, 18, 21, and 2022. So they're doing a wonderful job. Let's take a look at the new top 30 list for the Rockies, because there was some shuffling that did go on. And here's the thing about it. With all of that shuffling that went on, MLB Pipeline has yet to add the draft picks from this year. I'm going to let you know where I think they're going to end up. I am going to do that. But here's what happened with some of the shuffling of the top 30, according to MLB Pipeline. The biggest riser, of course, was Kyle Karros. He jumps all the way up to number 8. Even after his Northwest League MVP performance last year, MLB Pipeline and a lot of the other outlets that were out there didn't have him terribly high. I did a lot higher. And even still, number 8, you're looking at saying, you don't think he should be any higher than that? And, when you look at the guys ahead of him, it becomes a little bit harder to say that. But I think everyone, if you are really a prospect pundit, you're going to see things that other people aren't, and vice versa. So Kyle Karros just making a big jump. He had his first AAA home run of the season last weekend. Did a wonderful job falling a triple shy of the cycle on Saturday. He went 3 for 4, 2 runs scored. It was cool because they were celebrating the Albuquerque Dukes on Dukes Retro Night. His father, Eric Karros, if you didn't know, long career with the Dodgers. Mostly Albuquerque was a Dodgers affiliate for a very, very long time. Most of the guys in the Albuquerque Baseball Hall of Fame are former Dukes. Tommy Lasorda, Pedro Martinez, who came up with the Dodgers, Ramon Martinez. So many of the Albuquerque baseball greats came through the Dodgers system. So, he's been the guy, Kyle Karros, making that jump. And we'll see if he ends up getting an opportunity to make his major league debut, a 5th-round pick out of UCLA back in 2023. You also had Jared Thomas, who was up there pretty high, but now he's moved to that middle top third of the list after swinging his way to Double-A with an 891 OPS, and now he's at number 7. And I think he is really going to be a guy that gets a big league invite to spring training next year, and we could end up seeing him pretty soon. Just drafted in 2024, but these guys are going to get opportunities a lot quicker than I think in years past, and they should. And there's really nobody blocking them on top of that. Keep that in mind. The biggest faller, of course, on the list has to be none other than Benny Montgomery, a guy who was the 9th overall pick in the 2021 MLB draft here in Denver. In fact, they made the announcement. He wasn't there. None of the players were. They had that at the Buell Theater, that it was going to be Benny Montgomery. And this was a guy that, again, taken 8th overall in 2021, was ranked number 3 in the Rockies system back at the start of 2022 by MLB Pipeline. Then he was number 5 the next year, number 10 in 2024. He started this year at number 13 after a pretty solid season last year. He's been very much injury plagued, but after the midseason adjustment, after 4 new players getting added at the trade deadline and moving ahead of him on the list, Benny Montgomery is now number 29 for MLB Pipeline, almost off the list altogether. Injuries, unfortunately, making that impact on him, slowing that development. Montgomery did speak with Thomas Harding for the Rockies newsletter, Rockies.com newsletter. And, my heart goes out to Benny Montgomery because his comments let you realize that you are dealing with human beings here. Yes, they're big leaguers. Yes, you're rooting for them. Yes, they might disappoint you with their performance, and they might disappoint you with the hopes that you have for them. At the end of the day, they are human beings, and the Rockies, almost to a fault, make sure that they bring in nothing but good people. So Benny, talking with Thomas Harding, saying, quote, "After the MLB draft, you're on top of the world," before adding, "You're on Twitter, searching your name, looking at everything. You see everything. Now, I haven't looked my name up in a year. I know there's nothing good there right now. I don't need to look through." And that's, again, very sad to see that. It's unfortunate. Benny Montgomery, despite some of the troubles that he's been having, only 22 years old. We don't know what the future holds for him. Do we know that, he'll never be an all-star or a Hall of Famer, anything like that? No, we don't. I mean, certainly is the odds are against something like that, but can he still carve out a really solid big league career? Absolutely. You don't know. What you do know is that a guy who was previously, the 8th selection in the MLB draft doesn't have the value of the 8th overall pick in the 2021 MLB draft. He doesn't have that value anymore. And so the future from that perspective certainly is a little cloudier. And it's interesting to think about him now being teammates with Charlie Condon, who was drafted 4 years after Montgomery and is still a few hundred days younger than Montgomery. So Charlie Condon and Benny Montgomery, different tracks. One getting drafted out of high school, the other going to college and developing almost in private, right? When you do it when you do it at the minor league level as a professional, you're doing it a little bit more publicly, and there's less allowances that are going to get made as a young man that you're still developing even mentally. And when you're able to go to college at a great Division I school like the University of Georgia, like Charlie Condon was able to do, that's going to afford you certain things that going right into pro ball isn't. And I think, it takes a special talent to go from high school into the professional ranks. And that's not to say that, hey, some guys, who have gotten drafted high shouldn't have because they didn't have that mental capacity. You just don't know until you're in it. They're just 2 different tracks. That's it. They're just 2 different tracks. So we'll sort of wait and see what happens with that. Schaefer, I asked him on Sunday about giving more opportunities to AAA players because, I've looked at it like this and I've talked about this plenty on the Rockies Insider podcast. I do want to get to this comment. Is Benny Montgomery the new David Dahl? Honestly, you would hope. Let's not forget David Dahl was an all-star. He was able to stay healthy long enough to make an impact. David Dahl also had a lot more success at the minor league level than Benny Montgomery has had so far as a professional. So I don't know that's going to come to fruition. But David Dahl, despite a short career, did make his impact for the Rockies, was an all-star there in 2019. I don't know. That might be, if you're looking for comparisons, I think that's a good one for in more ways than one. I don't know that he'll ever have that kind of a first half, even if he's not an all-star. How about just a first half on par with what Dahl did in 2019? Maybe. It's not crazy to think about, but the bloom, unfortunately, is off the rose a little bit there. What I asked Schaefer was, Bernabel was a guy that I think a lot of people had forgotten about and wasn't really a top 30 prospect. I had him as a top 30 prospect because dude was only 23 years old at the AAA level, despite the fact he had been boosted off the 40-man roster in the past. Sometimes it's a logistical thing. And yeah, nobody else wanted him either. But at 23 years old in AAA, leading the team in batting average, showing some versatility, playing a little bit of first base, considering the Rockies were going to be in need of a third baseman after the McMahon trade, the stars just aligned to say, you know what, maybe this guy deserves an opportunity. And he got one, and he has been playing like gangbusters, hitting like gangbusters. You love to see that for a young guy like a Warming Bernabel. And Dugan Darnell, same thing, getting that opportunity and closing out his first 2 days in the majors. Less than 24 hours, he is getting the final out for the Colorado Rockies in back-to-back big league wins. Should more guys be getting more opportunities? Because, yes, listen to the Rockies. They're saying some of their guys aren't ready. They talk them up, saying how talented they are, and then they don't always give them those opportunities, even if they are struggling a little bit at the minor league level. Give them a chance, right? And I'd say, like, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe when a guy just isn't ready to your liking, you want them to work on something else, but maybe you can capture lightning in a bottle. I don't know what the future is going to be for Bernabel, but so far it's been fantastic for a guy that was knocking on the door. He didn't knock it down, but he was knocking on it. And it sounds to me like Warren Schaefer is a lot more interested in not forcing guys to knock down doors. If they're knocking hard, they need to start listening. Schaefer said, quote, "I always believe in merit, right? You earn your way. You should get a shot. Should absolutely get your shot." Darnell is a perfect example. Braxton, good example. Bernabel, great example. We have to look for those opportunities to bring young players up to succeed, and that's how we're going to be good in the future. That's how we're going to take off. Also mentioned, you need some of those older guys to contribute as well, before finishing by saying, you absolutely look for that, the opportunity for that. My main focus is to put them in the best chance possible to succeed while they're here. And I think Schaefer, from how well the Rockies have been playing with him as their leader, he's doing something right. And I think he absolutely deserves to be back in 2026. If there's a new GM, is that new GM going to want the old manager? We're going to have to wait and see about that. I'm also wondering if we could even see in the second half the return of Lucas Gilbreth, who's no longer on the 40-man roster, but he's not allowed an earned run since June 26th. 8 2/3 scoreless frames over 7 games, allowed 3 hits with 3 walks and 11 strikeouts through the span. So he is doing really well. I think he deserves another opportunity. And maybe he takes one of those places of a debut that we thought we might get. It's a re-debut for Lucas Gilbreth. I think he has certainly earned that. A pair of prospects were suspended for PEDs. Not sure if you saw that about a week or so ago. Pitcher Bienvenido Brito and outfielder Pablo Abad suspended for drug tests. Brito 60, Abad 56. Both of these players did, for what it's worth, come over from other organizations and were not originally signed by the Rockies. Saw a note somewhere, or rather I made the note when I read this, about the Rockies loving players once and then loving them forever and acquiring them at one point. Found it interesting to know that Griffin Herring, who came over in the McMahon deal, the Rockies' new number 5 prospect, he goes back to the Rockies coordinator of pitching strategies, Flint Wallace. Flint Wallace coached Griffin Herring when they were on a 7-under team. So Griffin Herring knows Flint Wallace. Flint Wallace knows Griffin Herring back when he would pick his nose and do who knows what with it. So that's a cool story for them to go back that far. Very common for the Rockies. Also want to point out with Chase Dollander and this start coming up this week that both he and Luis Peralta honing their craft at the Performance Lab in Scottsdale. For Dollander, it's been it's been mostly to make sure that his pitch shapes are the way that the team wants and the way that he wants it, to get the movement that is desired and the delivery, those mechanics. You also want to keep his innings down, since this is his first year in the majors, only his second full year of professional baseball. So they're trying to keep those innings down. This is a good way of doing that. And for Peralta, it's been about consistency of his delivery and ability to throw strikes, which is something that, frankly, is what got him sent down to AAA and why we haven't seen him since that opening month of the season. So yeah, he's got himself in trouble a little bit, and he's working his way out in the lab. And hopefully you see a little bit more from him in the second half, and that, he becomes a guy that you say, look, we got something really good for one of our players in that Jalen Beeks trade. Like, we brought back a guy who was able to impact on the big league roster. He did last year. He started the opening day roster on the team. We'll see what the future holds for him. Maybe it was a case of lightning in the bottle, and then the lightning escaped. You didn't put the cap back on it, whatever it may be. But so far, you like the trades that they made in 2024 a lot more than in 2023. I think the Rockies have gotten back more from last year's trade haul than in 2023. And it remains to be seen what the Rockies do get from this 5 prospect crop of players at the 2025 MLB trade deadline. At Patrick D. Lyons, MLB, and the Rockies Insider over on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe, do the whole thing. Appreciate you dropping by, leaving comments in the chat. The momentum you provide me each and every time you listen is something I greatly appreciate. But that kind of momentum, unfortunately, can only be as good as my next show. So, of course, I'll talk to you then.